You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYPC.
WCYTV
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast, where I have some unfortunate news to share. The Trump administration had a very mixed day. And the reason I say this is weird news to share is that momentum maybe can't last forever. But what I was not expecting was, you expect people to make errors that are maybe a really good attempt and they just don't land. You maybe expect individuals to give it their best effort and it's just not enough. But man, when it comes to the Republican Party, when it comes to conservatives, populists on the right side of the aisle, I have never seen a group of people so desperate to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. So today, and we're going to get to this a little bit later, our Elizabeth Mitchell, who we're going to be talking to live on the show in just a bit, was the new media who was, among other outlets from the left and the right, at the White House following the Trump senior cabinet around all day, and that included a meeting with Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer, and really a huge international victory for the Trump administration today. And that was all overshadowed by two extremely stupid things. So first of all, someone in the Trump administration, although Trump says he has no idea of anything about it, he doesn't know really who the Andrew Tate and his brother are over from Romania, the Tate brothers have been pseudo-released by the Romanian government and have flown back to the United States, landed in Florida this morning. Now, who are the Tate brothers? They are influencers who are basically, he's a Muslim pimp from over in Europe who has dual citizenship in the United States as well as in England, and he's an absolute idiot. And the reason he's an absolute idiot is not because of the people that I follow that like him or don't like him. He's an absolute idiot because he's bragged about pimping underage women. And he's also admitted to statutory rape consistently. Oh, sorry. Here's Andrew Tate admitting to statutory rape of 15, 16, and 17-year-old women.
I'm f***ing all these 16-year-old women or 18-year-old women, whatever the law is in America. 18?
It's 18 usually. You
18.
get married at 16.
All right, in Romania it's 16, sorry.
Yeah.
So if I'm f***ing all these 18-year-old women.
One of my main chicks has 200,000 Instagram followers, and I took her virginity when she was 17.
All right, so the Tate brothers, who are a disturbing crowd of individuals, and their weird pyramid scheme that they have online, in which literally to receive these self-help pyramid scheme style, rug pull life lessons from Andrew Tate, which amount to have a lot of sex with unmarried women and father a bunch of babies out of wedlock, which is a very beta thing to believe in. Not exactly something that's decent or useful in any way, shape, or form. And he was arrested by the Romanian government, which is a corrupt government, an extremely corrupt government, for accusations of rape and trafficking and a whole lot of other really bad stuff. And a lot of people have taken, because he was arrested by a corrupt government, that means that he's innocent, which is not at all how that works. But someone in the Trump administration likes him, and so worked at the behest of some individuals over on the populist side of the aisle to get him and to get the Tate brothers released back to the United States, which is unnecessary. That's a distraction. Why worry about what some fundamentalist Islamic rapist is concerned about over in Europe? I don't care. You shouldn't care. It's ridiculous. The only place that I would really enjoy seeing a rapist is at the end of a rope. And if you don't like that because you think, well, sometimes he says things that are critical of the left. I mean, I gotta say, someone saying mean things about the left should not be the only baseline thing that is valuable about a person. So that is the first thing that's really not great. It's a distraction from the Trump administration today. Then we get over to the big main event, the main attraction, the thing that was so unnecessary, such a missed softball pitch swing to throw the bat into the rafters. I could not believe it when I first saw it. So last night on Jesse Waters' show, right after our show ended, Pam Bondi, Attorney General of the United States, went on Jesse Waters to announce that the Epstein files, Jeffrey Epstein, the child trafficker who flew a lot of very wealthy individuals to sleep with children on his island in the Caribbean, that the Jeffrey Epstein files were going to be released. This is what Pam Bondi had announced several times. This is what Kash Patel, the FBI director, now had announced. And Pam Bondi said, you know what? We've got a lot of questions about it. We're dropping it tomorrow. This was last night.
You said last week that you have the Epstein files on your desk. When can we see them, and what's taking so long to release them?
I do. Jesse, there are well over, this will make you sick, 200 victims. 200. So we have over 250 actually. So we have to make sure that their identity is protected and their personal information. But other than that, I think tomorrow, the personal.
So she goes on to talk about how, well, we're just kind of cleaning up any personal information and then we're going to release it tomorrow. Rather big news. So a lot of us were waiting. And what did we get today? What we saw today was a photo shoot. I don't want you to misunderstand me. Those of you that are watching, those of you that are listening on the radio or the podcast, do me a favor, head over to youtube.com/Daily Signal, catch the live stream. Catch the live stream because these photos are silly. They are so silly. Archibald is singing about them in VeggieTales. It is a silly song beyond all recognition. It's a PR nightmare. So they announced from the Department of Justice that the phase 1 of the Epstein files would be released. They were going to be releasing these things in chunks, which is already just a little bit questionable. And then we started getting pictures on social media. The pictures on social media are of a group of conservative, right-leaning influencers, individuals with hundreds of thousands to millions of followers on social media, many of whom I like, several of whom I'm friendly with, close with. They were taken to the Eisenhower Executive Building. And there at the Eisenhower Executive Building, I'm sorry, this is just bewildering to me. At the Eisenhower Executive Building, they were given binders of the phase 1 of the Epstein files release, where the influencers gathered there proceeded to do a social media photo op. They took pictures with this Epstein file released, supposed Epstein file release, just, sitting back and just taking pictures to pass the afternoon away, and they're smiling. And then here's, again, Jack Posobiec, really nice guy, know him, good guy, and friends with over at the Post Millennial, and Libby Emmons' crew, really like them. Here's Jack posting his picture with it. Here's Liz Wheeler posting a picture with the Epstein files. And just more and more photos. It's a photo op. They're all standing there holding up these photos. Oh, look, we've got the Epstein files. And the entirety of the internet was dumbfounded. They thought this was a good idea. Dumbfounded. Why would you possibly think this is a critical piece of information that people have been looking forward to the release of that could possibly implicate major government officials, past and present, major financial institution heads, CEOs, CFOs, NGO leaders. This could have huge ramifications on the U.S. market, on the political infrastructure. It could be one of the biggest releases in U.S. history, and you're out taking influencer photos of it. The clownishness of it. Oh, but not just photos, because, we've got to get all of the cool kids involved. Here's one of the influencers announcing, oh, this is just a huge, amazing moment that these influencers, again, the files weren't released online. They were just given in binders to these influencers.
I saw y'all on the internet coming for Kash Patel saying he's day 5 and we haven't gotten the Epstein files. Well, I'm here outside the West Wing and look at what we got today.
A binder?
The Epstein files, baby.
Whoa!
Let's make America safe again.
And, we've looked through the files, and it just so happens there's nothing at all in the binder that they were given. So they're also extremely proud, their little photo op. Now, if the Department of Justice wanted to avoid the chaos and the nonsense, here's how they could have done it. They could have just released the files online and then brought in all of their little conservative influencers, as many as they'd like, or as few as they'd like, and then do a private briefing of the worst parts of the Epstein files. They didn't do this. They just handed out binders to, there's Libs of TikTok, Shira Reichik, again, people, some of them that I really like and admire, good friends with, so that they could take Instagram photos, which is insulting to the American people, because what's in those binders? A list of supposed sex abusers and participants in human trafficking. And you have a bunch of grown adults giddily smiling at this list that was so obscured that it didn't even contain anything useful whatsoever. We'll catch the radio crew in a second and continue a little of this over at the live stream. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. So unfortunately, that was not all. Then we get to make sure we actually get all of this here lined up. Then we get to the response from Congress. Representative Anna Paulina Luna stated today that she's like, I nor the task force were given or reviewed the Epstein documents being released today. In fact, a New York Post story just revealed the documents will simply just be Epstein's phone book. There's nothing in them. Then she types in all caps, this is not what we or the American people asked for, and a complete disappointment. Get us the information that we asked for. Okay. You know, if you wanted that information as a member of Congress, you have the authority to subpoena individuals in front of you. And if they don't release the information you want, as Congress, you have the power to hold someone in what is called inherent contempt. There was a jail cell beneath the U.S. Capitol that was built specifically for holding individuals in inherent contempt, where they will sit until either the Supreme Court of the United States orders them released or until the person gives the information that Congress is asking for. They have the power to do that. But instead, they're just going to write angry letters or whatever. There's nothing at all that is going to be done. And by the way, there's even more drama on top of this. A letter from Attorney General Pam Bondi accuses Kash Patel of being the guy that's somehow screwed all of this up and made a giant mess. So she's pointed out that he didn't even give her any of the Epstein files. He held a bunch of stuff back, or the FBI held a bunch of stuff back. She's ordering him to conduct an immediate investigation into why her order to the FBI was not followed. This is a mess. And it's a distraction because Trump and Vance had a pretty good day. The House and the Senate has had a pretty good week. This is a complete waste. And that doesn't even bring us over to other social media posts from like the House Judiciary. It also should be noted, just one other thing that's really stuck in my craw. The conservative influencers making their posts about all of this stuff. Let's see if we can pull this up here. So several of the accounts were not just posting their little photo ops. They were posting the exact same copy and pasted text that says, today I met with President Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, AG Pam Bondi, and FBI Director Kash Patel in the Oval Office. They handed me a binder copy of the Epstein files. This is the most transparent administration in American history. And they go on by saying this is just the start. People are going to go to jail. It's cut and pasted. It's not real. Now, influencers who have large enough accounts, they often have staff that run their accounts. But just rote copy and pasting what was likely sent to you from the Attorney General's office is embarrassing. This is what people made fun of the left for doing for ages. Remember during COVID? Remember when we were all told that, oh, well, you know, this is something that we need to address with the American people, that, you know, there's a lot of misinformation going on about COVID, and hundreds of news networks owned by different companies said the exact same thing verbatim on air about misinformation about COVID. And now we have individuals over on the right doing the exact same kind of nonsense. It's humiliating. And it is an unnecessary distraction. And by the way, now if the Epstein files are released, it doesn't even matter. We'll have to talk about this later in some bonus tonus because we're going to talk to Elizabeth Mitchell over at the White House. She's over waiting on the phone. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Cast here on the Daily Signal. We're cutting right over to our White House correspondent, Elizabeth Mitchell. Good to see you, Elizabeth. I know you had a long day in the smaller pool that was following the President of the United States around. You were the new media for the day. Great to see you there. I know that with Keir Starmer over from the United Kingdom, there was a ton going on. Have you gotten to eat yet?
Thanks for having me, Tony. So what I would say is it was so exciting to be new media for this whole day with Keir Starmer. I just finally was able to get a pre-dinner snack after getting home. It was a very long day at the White House. Was there from 9 to about 4:45 with no time to leave in between.
Almost a full Dolly Parton song.
To be done, but it was a very exciting day. I really enjoyed getting the opportunity to be on pool.
Well, to get to not just ask a question, but then for that question to be framed as a larger point of discussion with the president, with the vice president, with, of course, the prime minister of the United Kingdom. Do you think that you were satisfied with the answer? Because I know that it wasn't answered maybe in the exact way that you were looking for.
Well, I certainly enjoyed hearing from Vice President Vance that free speech violations in Europe were something that the Prime Minister and Trump are discussing during this visit. Of course, I would have loved to hear the president himself weigh in. He deferred to his vice president because Vance is the one who made a lot of statements kind of criticizing Europe for its free speech violations at the Munich Security Conference last week. So he deferred to Vance. I think the response that I was least satisfied with would have to be Starmer himself, who said that Europe has a long history of free speech and they're very happy with their free speech there, when in reality they have no equivalent to the First Amendment. They have laws banning hate speech. They have arrested people for praying silently in their heads outside abortion clinics and for social media posts. So I think that—
Hang on just a second there. Arresting people for simply standing outside. So in the actual jurisdiction of Keir Starmer, here's that video.
For me. Thank you. You can take it with us, but I need some help.
I'm not going to put cuffs on you. That's all. Right, we'll just put it on the front, okay? Just so it's... Can you step it? Please step back.
I can understand you're embarrassed.
I've got absolutely no issues with you filming, but please take a step back.
I mean, that's right in his backyard, and that's the law of the land in the UK. So not really seeing how he wriggles out of that. What else were you observing today? Obviously, there's a lot of chaos with the White House Correspondents Association having their grubby little mitts ripped away from deciding who gets to be in the smaller pools.
I was listening to the whispers of the longtime establishment media members of the White House Correspondents Association all morning, and they are very frazzled. They don't know what to do. Their security really has just been thrown off entirely. They're very concerned. But we at the Daily Signal, of course, are not concerned, because I was just so lucky, even though I have not yet joined the White House Correspondents Association, to have this opportunity to be new media in the pool today, the opportunity to be in the Oval Office right there, in making eye contact with the president, right behind the chief of staff, right behind Marco Rubio, the vice president, all these other people. I think is just so awesome to see that type of access to the president. As Caroline has said, it's not a right, it's a privilege, but it's great to see that privilege being granted to new media, alternative media, instead of just your usual CNN, NBC, etc.
And not just those on the right, but I've noticed that Axios has now been given a seat at the table, which, believe it or not, was not a thing before. Axios is obviously not on the right. Those that are outside of, as Caroline Levitt put it on the Ruthless podcast, outside of the Beltway, right? So they're outside of that DC bubble. I know that you don't exactly come from being raised on the mean streets of Washington, DC yourself. We're trying to get what's in DC out to the rest of America. And unfortunately, the Associated Press just isn't cutting it. Have you seen at least a different atmosphere inside some of the questions that have been asked, not just today, but in the last couple of days of your reporting? I know you're kind of fresh to the position.
Yeah, the atmosphere is totally different. Of course, I hadn't been to a briefing before the Trump administration, but just having heard about what they were like and having watched them on TV versus being in the briefing room now, the way that Caroline is willing to call on anyone. It's not just the people in the front row, the people with the biggest audiences. She will call on someone who hosts a podcast. She'll call on someone from maybe a smaller liberal outlet, a smaller conservative outlet. She really will call on anyone to give them the opportunity to ask a question. And so I think that is just causing droves of journalists to come to the briefing room every single day because anyone has a chance to ask a question. And it really is just such an exciting atmosphere and such a transparent, exciting time to be in the White House.
So let's bring that over to some of the upcoming stuff, because there are so many different topics, so many different activities, so many different executive order signings. Trump really has no problem bringing the press with him wherever it is that he goes. And so this has to just be a constant cacophony of just questions being fielded in from all different kinds of things. Is there anything that maybe the press is eager to ask about that you think is coming as a question that maybe hasn't been asked yet? Sorry, it was kind of a difficult way to phrase that question, but is there any kind of an inside track on maybe what's coming from some of the press in the next day or so?
Well, of course, this has been asked about a lot, but I think a lot of people are just really looking for more details on the Ukraine deal because President Trump has repeatedly said he doesn't want to give away too much information until a deal has been reached. He doesn't want to talk about concessions, the concessions Russia's going to make. He's not giving an answer on that yet, which totally makes sense because he doesn't want to jeopardize the deal. But I think that the details of peace in Ukraine and Russia are really something that people are very interested in asking about, learning more about, and getting more concrete answers on.
One thing that I wanted to ask you about is the President of the United States throwing questions to others that are in the room. He often has different cabinet secretaries, assistant undersecretaries that are next to him, and up to and including the Vice President of the United States. And he'll just pitch questions over to them that we see in, some of the media clips. You're seeing the before and after of the recording right in that room. Are the individuals who are being pitched to question-wise, are they really taken aback? Are they surprised or are they kind of standing at the ready to be given a question by the President of the United States?
I wouldn't say that they look like they're poised, just waiting to be asked a question, but I would say, because I think Vance was the only person who he tossed a question over to in this particular briefing, but Vance, as usual, seemed very calm, cool, and collected, seemed extremely prepared to defend his remarks in the Munich Security Conference and explain those further. So I would say it was not an issue for him at all that the president called on him, and I'm sure he's just really prepared to speak on that kind of issue at any time.
Last question. Then this is more of a curiosity, but I've seen a clip that's being thrown around by a lot of left-wing individuals that Trump today cut off the Prime Minister of the UK to just kind of cut him short because they were talking about Canada. And I've also seen kind of a right-leaning talking point suggest that Trump was actually cutting off the reporter that was trying to drive a wedge between this conversation between the UK and the president, especially regarding some of the Ukrainian-Russian stuff.
We had a really good discussion, a productive discussion, a good discussion, as a result of which our teams are now going to be working together on an economic deal. Our teams are going to be working together on security in Ukraine. You mentioned Canada. I think you're trying to find a divide between us that doesn't exist. We're the closest of nations, and we had very good discussions today, but we didn't discuss Canada.
Thank you.
Can you recall that moment that Trump said, that's enough, and whom he was talking to? Can you clear this up a little bit for us?
I think you're referring to a moment in the press conference. Is that correct? Not the Oval Office?
Yes, with the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and then Trump.
Yeah, well, the two of them were kind of united against this journalist, saying that it seems like you're trying to drive a wedge between us, and we don't want that. We want to have a good relationship between U.S. and UK. So the way that it seems to me is that this journalist thought, what's something provocative I can ask about, something that might cause a bit of a rift between these two who are acting so cordial, seeming to be so friendly with each other, shaking hands, etc. And I would say that attempt was completely unsuccessful and shot down from the podium.
That's good to know, because one of the things that I am really looking forward to throwing things over to you are all of these clips that emerge from press conferences, from certain press briefings, in which there's a small clip that's taken and being used as leverage to suggest that something is either very good or very bad. And knowing that you're there to actually give us some of the context is going to be one of the best things that shines in your reporting as the White House press correspondent for the Daily Signal.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm really excited to be able to see the whole picture, be able to be in the room with all these White House officials, Caroline Levitt, of course, and just really figure out what's going on so we can deliver it to our audience.
Absolutely. Elizabeth Mitchell, White House correspondent for the Daily Signal. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Tony.
We'll be back in just a second. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. All right. Now, very briefly here, while we're over on break for the radio side of things, I just wanted to touch on one quick point. First of all, Elizabeth Mitchell's question to the President of the United States on the subject of free speech, again, hitting where Keir Starmer wasn't particularly able to respond well. Here is that question. Let's make sure we've got it loaded up correctly. Yeah, this is clip 5.
Yes, ma'am.
In his remarks at the Munich Security Conference, Vice President Vance condemned free speech violations in the UK. Particularly, could you respond? What is your message?
I have an idea. We have the man right here. Come on. Let's go, JD. We're putting you on stage.
Great. Yeah, look, I said what I said, which is that we do have, of course, a special relationship with our friends in the UK and also with some of our European allies. But we also know that there have been infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British. Of course, what the British do in their own country is up to them, but also affect American technology companies and by extension, American citizens. So that is something that we'll talk about today at lunch. Thank you.
So again, that's a really excellent response by Vance, by Trump. That's our Elizabeth Mitchell asking that question. Trump also had a slam dunk moment today with his particular policy on the Ukraine situation. Keir Starmer announced not only that he believed Trump was the reason for the upcoming possible peace deal with Ukraine and Russia, but also that the UK was in favor of this United States-Ukraine mineral rights deal. And this is really incredible. Check it out.
Mr. President, I welcome your deep and personal commitment to bring peace and to stop the killing. You've created a moment of tremendous opportunity to reach a historic peace deal, a deal that I think would be celebrated in Ukraine and around the world. That is the prize.
That really is the prize. And again, for the United Kingdom and including a left-wing government in this case over for the libs, I think that the Trump administration is making incredible progress on the international front, which is another opportunity to look at how Trump is governing peace through strength as the United States policies on the world stage, and making sure that first and foremost, that Americans' interests are indeed put first. Now, Trump using the method, again, of trying to bring through tariffs as kind of the strong arm lever in this situation. Again, it's really unclear whether when Trump says that tariffs are going to be a permanent policy, for example, between the EU and the United States, just because Trump is saying this is going to be standard policy, as we've discovered, doesn't mean it's going to be standard policy. And you can say, well, that's because Trump doesn't know what he wants. Okay, you certainly could say that. However, I would argue that in the last couple of weeks, what we've seen is Trump suggesting a permanent tariff, and then when Trump gets concessions, he pulls away the tariff. Now, could Trump carry through with the EU thing? Absolutely. Am I expecting that he will in the end? Probably not. Trump is going to have a lot to wrestle with regarding inflation. And I think that Scott Bessent, who has been very active in the administration so far, not only in a communicative fashion, but also in a policy recommendation fashion, is probably going to intercede in that particular instance and give Trump some on-the-ground stuff. Again, I don't know. You don't know. That's the fun of punditry. We're going to break for just a second, come back with Jerry Lopez and awful tweets. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast.
Awful tweets, the ones that no one ever deletes. Awful tweets on the Tony Kinnett Show.
On 93 WIPC.
Welcome to Awful Tweets, where Jerry Lopez and I, Indy Spanglish, over on X, break down the worst, the bottom-feedingest tweets, posts, shared messages, articles, whatever that you guys send us. Jerry, how's it going, man?
Not too bad. How are you doing tonight?
You know, it's a little bit chaotic. It's a lot of bit chaotic, but you know what? That usually means we've got far more awful social media posts to dig through. So why don't we get started? I've got a few stinkers right off the bat here for you. I've got a hunch that you are really, really going to hate these. So we'll go ahead and get these pulled up. The first one is a budget recommendation from Governor Tony Evers of Wisconsin. They're changing all gendered language in Wisconsin law to gender neutral terms, I guess. Did you see the word used for mother? They're changing it to inseminated person. Ew.
Well, what is it for father?
Natural parent. Natural parent. What does that mean?
I mean, so my problem with this is, why shouldn't the father be called the inseminator? I think the issue with that is probably they couldn't get the copyright for that. That's probably a movie floating around somewhere. So I mean, it makes no sense. How I don't recommend calling your wife or the mother of your kids an inseminated person. That's not going to go well for you.
Oh man, it's a bit of a mess, but hey, you know, when has Tony Evers ever shied away from making a really bad decision? So Trump hosted a black influencer event at the White House because it's February, Black History Month. And so Charisse Lane posted a tweet saying Black excellence at the White House. And it's, again, a bunch of young black ladies in this photo over at the White House. Their leftist pundits and anchors have swooped in to say really gross stuff. So Roland Martin decided to call them the help. So I double, triple standards on when I guess you can be racist. Good Lord.
Yes, so this is a party that I actually know people that went to. So Whitley Yates was there. The mayor of Marion, Ronald Morrell Jr. was there. My issue with this is Roland Martin is basically the Democratic version of Carlton Banks. Like, he's the biggest clown in the world. People like him and Al Sharpton don't want any people of color to get ahead, because if you do, you stop voting Democrat. So what they have to do is they got to come here and shame. You would think that he would use this to be empowering. Instead, he turns around and in fact is pretty racist with what he's saying.
I think you're pretty right on the money. Just yikes. What a tweet. All right, we're going to skip Representative Jim McGovern and head over to Sam Bankman-Fried. Remember the legendary Democrat donor with the big, huge crypto rug pull? Well, he has some thoughts on the federal hirings and firings. He says, I have a lot of sympathy for government employees. I, too, have not checked my email for the past few hundred days. And I can confirm that being unemployed is a lot less relaxing than it looks. Then he says, firing people is one of the hardest things to do in the world. It sucks for everyone involved. And then he starts giving people like experience and advice. Jerry, do you know why he hasn't checked his email for the last few hundred days?
Yeah, he's in jail for 25 years for 7 charges of fraud and conspiracy. So he's having a hard time checking his email right now.
Oh, man. That is... I too have not checked my email, you know, because I'm in federal prison. All right, this one's from Keith Olbermann. So Elon Musk pointed out there's a shortage of top-notch air traffic controllers. He says, if you have retired but are opening to returning to work, please consider doing so. And Keith Olbermann said, edited for FCC airtime regulation, that's because you fired them, you dumb, stoned mother bleeper. That's Keith, piss on his face, Olbermann.
Yeah, that's disgraced former ESPN news anchor, now full-time Karen, Keith Olbermann, who doesn't do any research and doesn't understand that if you were a air traffic controller that was born after 1972, you actually have to retire when you turn 56. You don't have an option. Like, you got to go.
And also, it should be noted that as far as air traffic controllers are concerned, the Trump administration hasn't fired any air traffic controllers. That's not, in fact, the executive orders on the removal of staff from the FAA explicitly made sure that you could not construe the firing order to apply to air traffic controllers. But, you know, this next one is from the House Judiciary GOP, who responded to the botched Epstein file release from the Department of Justice today by posting a satire kind of tweet, I think. Said, breaking, Epstein files released, and then there's a link. And the link just goes to the Rick Astley Never Gonna Give You Up YouTube video, like doing a Rickroll.
I mean, mean, hey, that's a A1 tweet because we got rickrolled with the Epstein release anyway. It was a big joke. It's perfect.
I personally think, this is just me, that I really would prefer not to see government accounts in any way, shape, or form dunking on this. The House Judiciary GOP has the ability to subpoena the individuals involved. Kind of incredible because it is, in fact, a judiciary matter. All right, this next one's from the National. And if you've never read them, you ain't missing much. They're complaining about Trump's AI Trump Gaza, Mara Gaza video, Gaza Lago, whatever. And says that Arab nations were horrified with this gaudy video depicting Gaza as a Las Vegas playground for the rich. Oh man, I tell you what, the Arab world was horrified, Jerry. What do you think?
Yeah, I bet they were, and it wouldn't be the first time that we have people on the left telling minorities how they're supposed to feel about anything, right? Like this is part of the playbook.
I gotta say, if this is the thing that upsets Arab nations compared to some of the stuff that's happened over in the Middle East in the last couple of years, I don't think they're making the argument that they think they're making. But nevertheless, move on to a leftist pundit over on X saying, "Attention, remaining FBI agents. Kash Patel and Dan Bongino will inevitably order you to do illegal things. You need to remember your oath to the U.S. Constitution." What do you think?
And where was that the past 8 years? Like, let's be honest. Half the issues we're in right now is because people went against the oath that they took.
Also, I hope that they know that the constitutional head of the executive branch is also swearing an oath to the Constitution, like ordering someone to do illegal things. Like what? What are you thinking of? Like spying on the Trump campaign? Oh. Shifting over to the New York Times. Breaking news. The Trump administration plans to handpick the reporters who can ask the president questions, breaking decades of precedent in the White House. What do you think?
Yeah. The last president basically did the news correspondence like duck, duck, goose. He knew who he was going to pick already. He just had to go around and play the game. They all do this. One thing that Donald Trump has done that nobody else has done is he's opened it up to social media people now. There was an email that went out there accepting applications. So if you're a streamer or anybody like that, you can get in the building now.
Also, I just want to make this quite clear. The New York Times is framing this tweet to claim that the White House is eliminating individuals from asking the president questions. That's not true. There are smaller pools because you can't fit the entire press corps into the Oval Office or on Air Force One. And originally, the White House Correspondents Association would pick from like 10 organizations that were the richest left-leaning organizations to sit on the plane. And they stayed that way for a very long time. They didn't grow as ratings went up and down. So the White House cut out the middleman. By the way, some left-leaning publications, for example, like Axios, who delivers a heck of a lot of news, was on the press team yesterday. So I'm seeing more outlets from the left and the right actually getting access to the president of the United States. How is this a bad thing?
Yeah. Hey, Tony, before we go, guys, I don't recommend sending a Doge email to your wife asking her to give you 5 bullet points of things she accomplished last week. That is not something I recommend to anybody out there. Yeah.
I don't think that's particularly the best move either. Jerry
Elon did not work for Indy.
Jerry Lopez, you can find him over on X at Indy Spanglish. Jerry, thanks so much for joining us this week for Awful Tweets.
Hey, no problem. Have a great night.
We'll see you soon, and we'll be right back in just a minute or two with more of the Tony Kinnett Cast after the commercial break. We'll see you in a second. We're over on the radio, nationally syndicated, first on 93 WIBC.
To protect his family.
Devlin, politics editor of the Daily Signal. I want to invite you to tune into my new show, The Signal Sit Down. For far too long, your political leaders have not represented you in Washington, D.C. Instead, they've chosen to represent themselves, their friends, and powerful interests. On The Signal Sit Down, we'll expose how the sausage really gets made in Washington, D.C. with guests who have experience on the inside. Past guests include Senator Ron Johnson, Congressman Andy Harris, Senator Rick Scott, and Congressman Riley Moore. So check out the Daily Signal's newest show, The Signal Sit Down, on YouTube, or listen to the audio version on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'll see you there.
Subscribe to get the news the legacy media won't tell you and only the Daily Signal can bring to you.
Pro-life, pro-women, conservative, and feminist. That's right, we're Problematic Women, the show that is made by and for conservative women across America. The radical left doesn't know what to do with strong, independent women who believe in traditional values and love America. So you might say we're problematic to the left's narrative of what a woman should be. Here at Problematic Women, we talk about the issues in the news that you care about, from the politics on Capitol Hill that affect you at home to marriage, health, wellness, and the media. So, Problematic Women, you are invited to grab a cup of tea, pull up a chair, and join us every weekday for some classy, engaging, and sometimes fun conversation. Join Problematic Women on the Daily Signal's YouTube and Rumble every Wednesday, or catch the show wherever you get your podcasts on Thursday morning. And be sure to follow Problematic Women on Instagram.
Subscribe to get the news the legacy media won't tell you and only the Daily Signal can bring to you.
If I could fall into the sky.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
I know that intro bumper is just a bit long, but I tell you what, Allison, I can't help it. I love that particular mashup of 1,000 Miles and Scrubs just a bit too much, you know. Some things are just too good.
Perfect nostalgia.
Yeah, perfect amount of nostalgia. All right, a couple of other things that are really huge national news that we didn't quite get a chance to dig into because, you know, everything's just constantly moving at 815 miles an hour. Clarence Thomas is, in fact, one of the greatest beasts ever to serve on the Supreme Court. That man is a powerhouse. And just his sheer influence on the other justices, whether or not he has the title of Chief Justice, which unfortunately he doesn't. Chief Justice Roberts stands in Clarence Thomas' shadow. Amy Coney Barrett can yet hold a smidgen of a handle to the great Clarence the Muscle Man Thomas. And Brett Kavanaugh, probably, I tell you what, if he was drinking in high school, Clarence Thomas was probably down in 40s in middle school. The man is just unstoppable, and here's why. The Supreme Court of the United States has issued a temporary stay, which is a kind of a bit of a misnomer, and I'll explain why in a second. Basically, the Supreme Court issued a stay on the judicial order requiring the Trump administration to release the billions of dollars in U.S. foreign aid through USAID. These judges, which have been flooding into the room suggesting that Donald Trump isn't allowed to use the constitutionally given authority of the presidency of the United States by exerting his direction over the U.S. federal agencies. That's not actually something that the Supreme Court is going to be able to turn a blind eye to forever. Nor should they. In fact, I'm a little surprised it took this long for the Supreme Court to issue a stay. So in a stay, when a stay is ordered by the Supreme Court on a particular order, it is basically in effect until the Supreme Court writes until the Supreme Court writes a further order. Usually this one would be written by the Chief Justice. Now, here's the fun part. The Supreme Court is not actually obligated on any timeline to write the further order based on that stay, which means that the Supreme Court can indefinitely block these goofy orders and injunctions, these national injunctions by the federal justices against Trump's constitutional authority of and over the executive agencies until an actual lawsuit is brought up to the Supreme Court itself, which is going to happen. We are starting to move a little bit closer to that point in time. But for all intents and purposes, what do you need to know? The Supreme Court of the United States is going to weigh in on the side of the president when it comes to the executive authority of federal agencies. And if you don't like that, then you shouldn't give so much power and authority to federal agencies. I know, incredible. If you don't want the president to be messing around with USAID, then it should be Congress who orders amounts of money sent for specific projects to various countries in very direct, specific terms in the annual budget, in the budget reconciliation process. Then the representatives who voted for it would be directly accountable. Right now, Congress just writes a blank check to USAID, and then the president can then spend that however he wants. Now, should the president have that power? I don't really think the president should have a personal finance account from the American taxpayer that he can then use to bribe other countries to bend to the United States will. That was what it was originally formed for during the Cold War. But again, that power rests with Congress. And as long as Congress continues to be lazy and continues to spend its time on Twitter X instead of, working in committees and passing new laws that limit the scope of federal government, then you're going to continue to see points after points after points in U.S. history where the president's power expands. Because the more power you give to federal agencies, the more power you give to the chief executive of those federal agencies, which is, you guessed it, the president of the United States. So I personally don't find it all that appealing that the president has unlimited authority over tens of thousands of federal agency individuals who can impose regulations and rules. But there are exactly 0 out of 0 bills on the floor of the House right now or on the floor of the Senate to limit the scope of that power. So, just kind of some food for thought. The last thing that I believe should be noted on the particular docket for news this evening has to be a very curious argument by the Maine legislature to censure State Representative Laurel Libby, who came on the show to talk about the weird obsession the Maine governor has with keeping boys competing in women's sports. And there's going to be a massive lawsuit over this. The Democrats are continually clinging to this idea that LGBTQ plus 2IA whatever nonsense with kids is very popular, and that harming women and harming women's safety, harming women's rights, harming women's sports in the pursuit of dudes in skirts is really not popular with all but 2 demographics in this country. The 2 demographics are suburban women aged 18 to 30 and then suburban women aged 30 to 55. Those are the only 2 demographics that still support the LGBTQ plus whatever nonsense. Oh, also guys whose wives have boyfriends. That's the 3rd demographic. All of those groups vote exclusively on the left. And that's one of the reasons why I believe, personally, that you're seeing the left desperately cling to this. Those are their last big voting constituents they can count on. Now, they used to have a few more constituencies like black voters and Hispanic voters. They can't count on those anymore because Hispanic voters are traditionally very conservative, many of whom are Catholic, and the left, like Gretchen Whitmer doing her weird lesbian Dorito communion ads, that really annoys a lot of Hispanic Catholic voters. And then the Black American communities, which should be plural because inner city, external, rural, suburban, black culture is different depending on the region. It's not just one slated block, has been lied to consistently by the Democratic Party on what causes the ills inside America's cities and what causes certain things in regard to crime and law enforcement. The other group that was traditionally a Democrat voting base were the unions. And considering that Trump is appointing a left-leaning member of the Labor Department, I'm not really sure how they're going to go to the left of Trump on labor for that. But if Bernie Sanders can't win them over, then it looks like the right is going to maintain that voting bloc. It's the Tony Kinnett cast here on The Daily Signal.